Hello, and welcome to today's DataSeer webinar titled Material Takeoffs, Estimation, and Artificial Intelligence. My name is David Wasson, and I will be today's moderator along with my colleague, Joe Orlick. A few reminders before we begin. This webinar is being recorded, and a link to the video will be provided afterwards. Please use the Q&A button on your screen to ask questions or to upvote your favorite question. Today, we are privileged to have a panel of experts in capital estimation, construction technology, and artificial intelligence. The panel includes Jaris Tilstra, lead estimator at Interstates, Waymon Lofton, director of estimating with Black & Veatch, and our own Joanne Ting, CEO of DataSeer. Today, we will be talking about two hot topics: capital construction costs and engineering construction technology, namely focused on artificial intelligence. And now, before I introduce the panel, a quick snapshot on the engineering, construction, and technology sectors. Today, construction investment has been in the news for multiple reasons, including the passage of sizable global construction stimulus programs by multiple governments. A few of these, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with, include the $39 billion CHIPS Act, the $1.2 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill, and the 800 billion euro Next Generation EU fund. Some of the challenges facing the E&C industry include economic uncertainty, rising construction material costs, extended lead times, and ongoing skilled labor shortages. Starting with construction materials, the industry is faced with a 40-year high inflation rate, increased transportation costs, higher energy costs, and a lagging supply chain still recovering from the pandemic shutdowns. All of this has led to a 35% increase in material costs since 2020. Labor shortages are another challenge. The shortages are due partly to early retirement during the pandemic, transitioning to other industries, an aging workforce, fewer younger people entering the sector, and a record low immigration. Some economists estimate the gap at more than 500,000 workers just to meet the 2023 demand, and that's on top of the normal hiring pace for 2023. These shortages are expected to even outlast the higher material costs and the supply chain challenges. However, 2023 does have good news. Construction material input costs are down for the first time since August 2020. This is about 1% less than this time last year. Construction spending has improved, with non-residential construction increasing again for the 10th time in the past 11 months. Most of these gains are coming from the construction projects within the manufacturing sector. Some engineering construction companies are embracing new technologies to boost productivity, to improve accuracy of cost estimates and cost controls, provide greater data transparency, and reduce human errors that can lead to expensive rework. While engineering and construction is one of the world's largest industries, it's no secret the sector can be conservative and historically slow to adopt new technology. But driven by the current industry challenges, this trend is changing. And according to a May 3rd, 2023 research article by McKinsey, the engineering construction software technology space is experiencing an explosion of investment. An estimated $50 billion has been invested in engineering software companies since 2020. Between 2020 and 22, it's 85% higher than the previous 3 years. Some of the technology being adopted include virtual design and construction, project management and cost controls, estimating simulation, Internet of Things, 3D printing, robotics, blockchain technology, and artificial intelligence. Speaking of artificial intelligence, with the recent and sudden rise of GPT deep learning, we've all seen artificial intelligence in the headlines, and in some cases, a bit sensationalized. But when you cut through the media hype, we see that engineering construction firms are currently using AI, and it's providing practical and quantifiable benefits. We look forward to our panel addressing these challenges and solutions, and encourage you, the audience, to participate with your thoughtful questions and comments. And don't forget to use the Zoom upvote feature for your favorite questions. And now I'd like to introduce our first panelist, Jaris Tilstra of Interstates. Jaris is lead estimator with 14 years of experience out of Interstate Sioux Falls, South Dakota office. He started out as a traveling field instrumentation technician performing instrument installations, configurations, calibrations, troubleshooting, and plant startups. He now leads a team of estimators who propose on industrial automation projects spanning multiple industries. The estimates primarily include PLC and HMI related hardware, software, control panel buildouts, and engineering and programming. Let's welcome Jaris. And Jaris, the floor is yours.
Thanks, David. Hi, my name is Jaris Tilstra, and I work in our estimating department at Interstates. I focus most of my time on estimating industrial automation projects. Here at Interstates, we are not immune to the issues David mentioned. From a supply chain perspective, some of the automation hardware has a 35-week lead time, and on the electrical construction side of the business, we have pad mount transformers out 110 weeks. Supply chain disruptions and price fluctuations make it challenging to nail down our costs for the estimate. From a people perspective, the market is tough to try to find skilled labor. We are seeing more retirements than entry into the workforce. Our recruiting team is getting creative through multiple strategies to find the team members we need. Interstates is headquartered out of Sioux Center, Iowa, with multiple regional offices and offers industrial electrical solutions tailored to meet the needs of clients nationwide and internationally. The markets we work within include CPG, data centers, energy, chemical, food and bev, value-added ag, distribution, and water wastewater. Our solutions range from consulting, electrical engineering, electrical construction, automation, control panels, modular solutions, maintenance and support, operational technology, and cybersecurity. Next slide, please. A large part of our estimates is based upon piping and instrumentation diagrams, also known as P&IDs. P&IDs are detailed diagrams of industrial process that shows the interconnection of piping, process equipment, instrumentation, motors, pumps, control valves, heat trace, and other process equipment. You can think of P&IDs as a map from start to finish of a particular process. For example, to make soybean oil, you would first receive the whole soybeans, and with a fair amount of processing, you end up with soybean oil and other byproducts. A time-consuming task includes the creation of a motor and device list from P&IDs. Motor and device lists make up a large part of our estimate. Depending on the project, we're doing a lot of things with a particular device. We may need to specify, procure, install, wire, provide inputs and outputs for, program, checkout, commission, and start up that device. Depending on the project, this can be thousands of items. Historically, this has been done by printing out the P&ID set and highlighting each motor and device and manually entering them into a spreadsheet. Now with DataSeer, we can run that same P&ID set through the software to create the raw motor and device lists. DataSeer detects the circles as a symbol and captures the prefix and device number as separate columns in a CSV file to create that device list. For example, DataSeer was able to process 100 pages and deliver a device list 3,500 rows long in approximately 20 minutes with a high degree of accuracy. This would take somebody doing it manually days to do. The sample at the bottom of the screen shows devices in red that we are trying to capture with the output on the right. So in separate columns, it captures the PDF page number, the P&ID number. It calls it an instrument, captures the prefix containing the instrument type and the unique equipment number. Motors can be a bit trickier since there is not one symbol for all motors. Motors can be shown as the piece of equipment the motor is driving, such as the bucket elevator shown on the screen, or a pump, fan, or conveyor. There's also other pieces of data associated with motors, such as the description, the horsepower, starter type, that can be a bit tricky to group together since the information does not always follow a pattern. DataSeer does take our feedback to enhance the software and is working on a solution for grouping motor data. We have also used regular expressions. Oh, can you go back? To find motor tags and descriptions. This allows you to get more specific in the text you're trying to find. I have found ChatGPT useful in helping coming up with those regular expressions. Using the example in the screen clip below for tag 0304-BE-01, I can simply use the prompt regex to find 4 numbers, followed by a dash, followed by 2 letters, another dash, and finally 2 numbers. And it will provide the regular expression for you with a detailed explanation. You can then take that regular expression over to DataSeer, and it will capture all motor tags with that pattern. We have also used DataSeer for P&ID revision comparison. While DataSeer does not natively tell you the differences between the 2 P&ID sets, it does provide the raw takeoff, and then we can further manipulate and compare the old list with the new list using Microsoft's spreadsheet compare. Using DataSeer does not take the human out of the picture, though. There still needs to be a QA/QC review, and users cannot blindly trust the output. DataSeer does a raw takeoff of symbols and text as shown on the P&IDs, but users still need to know what the data represents, its context, and how to use it. For an example, an engineer who created the P&ID set may not always follow their standards and may use a device symbol to show the horsepower or a starter type for a motor. Next slide, please. DataSeer has also proven beneficial in extracting data from tables, creating equipment lists from electrical drawings, lighting takeoff from plan views, and even capturing text from handwritten documents. For example, many times we receive control panel drawings that contain multiple bill of material tables. DataSeer will search the document for the tables and stack the tables nicely in a CSV file where I can further manipulate and consolidate the data. Before DataSeer, I actually used Bluebeam Extreme, ran OCR on the document, but I still had mixed results. Sometimes the data would just not come out properly. I have yet to have a table that DataSeer cannot read. It does it much, much better. At the bottom of the screen, I have a sample of a handwritten motor list with a description, tag number, starter type, and horsepower. I like to think that if a human can read the document or drawing, DataSeer is likely to read it. Next slide, please. Getting some team members bought into a technology like this can be a challenge since they are so used to doing a task a certain way for years. There may be a fear of the unknown, maybe a fear of job loss. They may not trust the software, They may have data security or privacy concerns. Maybe they have a lack of knowledge or skills, or maybe they don't understand what this technology can do for them. I think the key to getting team members bought into a technology is to make sure they understand its benefits, they're confident in their ability to use it, and feel supported throughout the process. By taking that proactive and supportive approach, you can help ensure that the technology is adopted successfully and integrated into your team's workflow. Overall, DataSeer does the heavy lifting of the tedious takeoff efficiently, consistently, and accurately, allowing our team to focus in on more complex and creative work. Thank you for your time. That's all from me. And next, we'll hear from Waymon.
Excellent. Thank you, Jaris. Let me introduce Waymon Lofton. Waymon has been developing estimates for 33 years. Estimates vary from a few $1 million to multi-billion-dollar lump sum proposals. As an estimating department manager, he's continuously explored opportunities for delivering accurate estimates as efficiently as possible. These actions include developing procedures, training others, removing barriers, and ultimately providing the tools needed for successful estimates. His vision led a new way of looking at early estimates via estimating simulation tools. He brings a unique combination of experience, having worked for engineering and construction companies, owner-operating companies, as well as software companies. And with that, the floor is yours, Waymon.
Appreciate it, David. Thank you. I really look forward to joining you guys today and sharing some of my experiences with you. Most of my experience is coming from process type estimates. If you go to the next slide, I wanted to just introduce a little bit about our company and such. But to me, what our clients are asking for is a new realm of information much sooner. They need much more accurate estimates. And to me, it is a 21st century type of a view of what's required. There has been step changes, from the slide rules over to, the calculators to, the different things that we use now to the computers and such. And we're stepping through some of that right now. And I think that the tools we're talking about now are part of that future vision. Next slide, please. I'll do a kind of an introduction. I'll keep this very simple. How we apply some of these tools, and then what we're seeing are the results. Next, please. So on the introduction, I want to introduce Black & Veatch a little bit to you. So if you haven't heard of Black & Veatch, we've got over 10,000 professionals and 120 offices globally. Our headquarters are in Overland Park, Kansas. We're the 8th largest employee-owned ESOP in the United States. Projects in 100+ countries and 6 continents. 4.3 billion revenue last year. And our mission is building a world of difference through innovation and sustainable infrastructure. We work relentlessly to solve humanity's critical infrastructure challenges, and we value safety, accountability, collaboration, entrepreneurship, integrity, ownership, and respect. And you can see on the right there, we're pretty highly ranked in several different categories as far as the companies go. And it's a unique company that's a pleasure to work with. So next slide, please. Just some of the things that we get into: advanced power, advisory, commercial, industrial, distributed infrastructure, environmental, federal, grid, operating assets, process, and water. And we've got estimating groups in all of those different segments. And anyway, it's just a good introduction there for our Black & Veatch company. Next, please. Now, what I want to talk to you about is, in the introduction, was commented a bit there that I'm always looking for ways to becoming more efficient. And one of the challenges that we face is that we want very accurate estimates as soon as possible. And if you're a member or understand what AACE defines as the requirements to achieve those accurate estimates, you'll know that typically producing a more accurate estimate creates a higher cost because there are a lot more definition items that are required. So to try to find tools that allow for that better estimate, but doesn't cost more and maybe even cost less is a very unique challenge. But that's what these tools are doing for us. And I'll talk to you some about that. Next slide, please. So one of our main steps in creating that more accurate estimate is actually material takeoffs, counting the items. And if you get the counts wrong, you can't get the material pricing right or the construction labor correct, because it's all based off of that scope you've got. And so our material takeoffs have got to be accurate. They've got to be timely. So I can't wait to the last minute to get the material takeoffs because then I don't have time to put the pricing and labor on it. The other thing is, and I don't know about you guys, but our company and our engineers tend to change things a lot. So I've actually gotten an MTO one time from our electrical group that said it was final, but it was 4 different times I got it. So which one was really final? I don't know, but 4 finals makes me, have to adjust quite a few things quite often. So anyway, our tools have got to allow those last minute changes that happen because they can make a difference in a project cost, whether it proceeds forward or not. And so we've got to be able to handle that. So that's our situation. We've got to have good, accurate MTOs that we can work with. Next, please. So you heard earlier in Jaris's definition of what a PNID is. And so I'll just graphically show you one here that, we pull from. And the PNIDs are such an important scope document for us because we pull so many material takeoffs. There's so many counts of different things that are priced up and helps us to organize our estimate. So the pipe itself, that's what a lot of people would think of as a PNID. Okay, give me the piping off of it. But there's a lot more to just piping. There's fittings, valves, the specs on the pipe, which define the metallurgies, the flange ratings, and so forth that's required to price that piping. The insulation requirements, electric tracing or steam tracing, and then all the instruments and the tag numbers. So what we do is we coordinate our key scope documents like the PNIDs and our estimate so that we carry the tag numbers across into our estimate. So if we need to verify later, do you have this valve in? We can go to that tag number and go find that control valve. And it's very, very clear, very easy to see. Here's the tag, here's the valve, here's the price, here's the labor to install it. And the same goes true for all of the piping and all the fittings that are associated with it. We have them in by line numbers and we have them in by pipe spec. So there's no shortcut. We can't take a shortcut on getting this definition in our estimate. That would actually deteriorate from our accuracy. We want to be able to align with our scope directly and be able to prove that we've got the right scope and the right pricing and labor and so forth in for our scope. And this is what we use. We use the PNIDs to accomplish that. But can you imagine, just sit for a moment and think about it. All right, take a spreadsheet, take an Excel spreadsheet, and now count every one of these things and put it into that spreadsheet. And oh, by the way, you've got 100 of these to do, and you've got to get it done as quickly as possible. So think about the monotony of doing that. And everyone's different. There's not a copy and paste to it because every tag's different, every line's different. And you go through that and you build that out of the PNIDs. And that becomes your material takeoff. So I've done that. I've done that for a long time. I know other estimators who've done that. And where it's satisfying to capture the information after it's done, but while you're doing it, it's not fun at all. It's very tedious and you can very, very easily make mistakes in doing that. Next slide, please. So what I just described to you is the manual effort of developing those material takeoffs off of those PNIDs. And yeah, I mean, it's just, hopefully I've created the visual for you. I don't have to read too many of these words, but um, simply put, typically you would do it with a team of people. And think about it, if you've got 4 or 5 people um, uh, doing takeoffs off those PNADs, then people could be interpreting things differently, applying different fittings for different symbols just because there's misunderstanding. And so there's not consistency sometimes with those manual efforts. And that again creates errors in our estimates. And so what we found, we experimented with DataSeer to see if it could really help us. And I'm not one to just jump out there and grab the first new thing that's on the street and start using it. It's got to really work for us because our neck's on the line. When we go to our reviews and go to our clients, we have to be accurate. We're not guessing. And so what we did is we took a few of them and did manual, and we did DataSeer. And what we found, well, I'll tell you in a minute or two on the next slide, I think that our results were. But we were capturing the same information as we were manually, but we were only using 1 or 2 people and for a few days to get that accomplished. Next slide, please. Here are the results. Okay, next. So for DataSeer, we saw that it was an increased accuracy because it wasn't getting tired and it was consistent. If we had defined something incorrectly in DataSeer, it was consistently picking it up that way. And we could go back and adjust that and correct that if we needed to. It was fast. We completed the PNIDs in days versus weeks doing a manual effort. And when we got updated PNIDs, it was easy to rescan those and get the new MTOs, compare and get those folded into our estimate quickly. Less resources. We use probably 10 to 15% of what the manual effort would take, and we tied up less people in doing so. So from the results that you see here, you can see that we've accomplished the same thing that we needed to accomplish with the material takeoffs. The difference is that it took less time, less resources, and we felt like it was more consistent with what we had versus the manual efforts. Now, Jaris mentioned this earlier. This doesn't mean you get rid of the human aspect. No, because once we do this, in part of our time that we spent is going back through and quality checking. So we look at every PNID, make sure we're picking up the valves and the fittings and everything associated with that correctly, and make sure that the MTOs are correct. So there's some time spent doing that, but in general, what we're finding is a lot faster than just doing manual efforts. Next slide, please. And so just to sum it all up, we utilize DataSeer to develop material takeoffs for high quality estimates. We find it accurate, fast, and flexible. Now, this discussion that I just presented is really around DataSeer, but there's a bigger picture to that, and that is the AI type of concept. And we do utilize other tools to help us create those early estimates that are quantity based. So providing MTOs that that allow us then to produce the earlier accurate estimates that our clients are demanding these days. So DataSeer is just one of those. And anyway, the future, I think, is pretty bright for the new tools that we have out there. Thank you for the time of talking with you.
Thank you so much, Waymon. I really appreciate that. I'd like to introduce our next panelist. Her name is Dr. Joanne Ting, the CEO of DataSeer. Joanne is the CEO and DataSeer. She has a bachelor's in science and computer engineering from University of Waterloo and a PhD in computer science from the University of Southern California. She has worked in machine learning since 2003 in robotics, control manufacturing, automotive, risk management, and industrial application domains. And now, please, the floor is yours, Joanne.
Thank you, David. Before we dive more into AI in the engineering and construction domain, perhaps some definitions are in order. So some questions out there, artificial intelligence, what is AI? What is machine learning, also known as ML? And what's deep learning? That's also another sort of hot topic trend that that the media has kind of published a lot about. So to start, artificial intelligence, AI, combines compute and data to enable problem solving. And you get things like decision trees, neural networks, expert systems. These are some examples of AI models. And then diving one level deeper, machine learning, also known as ML, it's a subset of AI where you have models that learn from experience and make predictions and assumes that historical past is predictive of the future. It uses statistical methods to enable improvements with experience, essentially training compute machines to get better at a task without explicitly programming, right? Something. And then finally, deep learning, it's an area of ML. Essentially, it consists of deep neural network models that require large amounts of data for training due to the large number of parameters in the model that needs to be optimized. And these have been shown to be relatively powerful in terms of predictive capabilities. Another point I want to touch upon is what are the requirements, assumptions for successful application of AI, specifically ML? And at a high level, there are three things. First thing is data. Specifically, you need label data to ensure that there's a feedback loop on what's being learned and a mechanism for error correction. So what you predict, what the model predicts, what you actually observe is ground truth. By calculating the delta, you have an error. And this is so you actually get that improvement over time in terms of predictive performance. Now, deep neural networks require more training data since there are more model parameters to be optimized. And then naturally, the shallow, smaller ML models require less data due to the fewer number of model parameters. The second assumption is that the past is predictive of the future. So if the future is changing, slowly evolving over time, there needs to be training data, labeled of course, to support this continual learning of new patterns. And then finally, the third assumption is that making mistakes has to be okay. It has to be acceptable. So long as the prediction errors decrease over time, the model will converge to a level of predictive accuracy. The models will improve and continue to learn over time, not making the same mistakes again. So we've already seen the impact of AI across different areas of engineering and construction. Next slide, please. And this ranges anywhere from the pre-construction phase, during construction, post-construction. And there's plenty of AI software tools out there. So I'm just gonna cover a little bit that broad sweep across the different sectors. So in pre-construction, in the bidding phase, you have data-driven estimation tools similar to, like DataSeer. And then in feed and also during engineering design, I've also been seeing some R&D that try to optimize and predict designs based on historical, subblocks of schematics. And then during construction, there's a class of AI tools out there that try to emphasize and help with on-site worker safety to mitigate risk, to increase worker productivity, and you have robotics and sort of autonomous technologies out there for that. And then going into post-construction, you have in operations and maintenance, there's also operator training simulations, asset performance management. There's plenty of software tools and platforms that say focus on trying to make sure you have data integrity, right, in your platform, your system, validating, cleaning time series data you might have from sensors, predictive maintenance, right, and trying to do preventative maintenance and monitoring your asset data streams. And then across the spectrum of all this, there's underlying areas like supply and chain management. How do you optimize the ordering of correct parts from relevant suppliers, right? Or even project planning, controls and management. How do you ensure on time and under budget or in budget project delivery? And then specific to estimation and takeoffs that Jaris and Waymon were talking about, the ultimate goal there is really to have this digitization of diverse set of engineering documents, right? Ranging from schematics, spec sheets, vendor manuals. Essentially, the holy grail is to have this treasure trove of digitized engineering data, the single source of truth from which, once you have this, you can query and start to find patterns, correlations with successful outcomes. I'd like to conclude my session with a section on parting thoughts. This is some food for discussion and digestion. So first of all, some questions. Who's supplying and labeling all this training data that's needed for these AI tools? And who's doing this over time in case the feature is evolving as well? And then what scenarios is it acceptable, tolerable to have mistakes in the predictive model performance? Also, keep in mind, these are scenarios where there should be a repetitive, predictable task, right? Because otherwise you're predicting, different things into the future. And then furthermore, everyone can agree, there's lots of data lying around in the engineering construction space, but they're not all structured and they're not all labeled, which are kind of two requirements needed, right, for ML learning. So what do we do about these data sets? And then data security and privacy, that's yet another hot button topic that's at the forefront of everyone's mind. How do you leverage learning while still preserving security and privacy, especially when you have sensitive IP confidential engineering documents? And then the last question or last topic I'll leave everyone with is, how do you design these AI tools so that way the human and the machine work together in a collaborative, not competitive way, right? It's got to be a way that the human feels supported and at the same time feeds into all these open questions that I just listed. So anyway, some food for thought, some questions that actually have been active discussions and are ongoing R&D topics in the ML community. Over to you, Joe.
Thanks, Joanne. And I want to extend a thank you to all of our panelists for the great content and insights they provided today. As we move into the last 20 minutes or so of the webinar, we'll be transitioning into a Q&A session where we'll have the opportunity of attendees to pose any questions to one panelist or all the panelists to get their feedback while we have a quorum today. The remainder of the call. I'm checking the QA box that we've collected thus far. No questions have been posed, so I will give a minute or two to see if the audience like to have anything posed during this period of time. Maybe before we go and wait for that information get posed into the QA space where we can actually have some feedback from the attendees. Maybe I'll post some that we have internally, topics that will come up from DataSeer side that I will pose to both Waymon and Jaris. If you just to return to the conversation, one is the kind of role of PDFs that come into estimation, just in terms of the necessity for having that data continuity and that format of information submitted from your customers and trying to provide estimates in that format. What is the percentage of projects you're typically working with PDFs from having to do data extractions? Is that something that's relatively high? Is it something that's more niche and depending on industry? Jaris, why don't you take first stab at that, if you would?
Of course. I would say most of the estimates or projects we're working on do receive PDF drawings. They're usually developed in CAD and then converted to PDFs and provided to us. If they just provide the DWG file, we also have the ability to convert them into PDFs. I've also even taken pictures, converted them to PDF, and had DataSeer be able to detect text and count symbols like on a picture of the control panel, which was pretty impressive. So I'd say 95% of the documents we receive is PDFs.
Great. Thanks, Jaris. Waymon, just any insight from the team over at Black & Veatch, typical number of estimates you guys are working with that are P&D or PDF, I should say, related. How many of those estimates are in that file format that you're typically working with?
Yeah, so I would say all of our detailed estimates are in the PDF, and that's typically how we get the P&AD information is through PDF files, and so it's a 100% as far as those types of estimates go.
Awesome. We have some that have been put within the chat, so let me start to go through here. First one posed is, what different formats can data be exported from DataSeer? So this thing is an internal one. So Joanne, I'll refer to you for this specific question. The different formats of data that can be exported. It says different formats can be data exported into from DataSeer. Well, I guess so in terms of data types of data that we can get out, we'll start there.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna import it into or export it out of.
Well, you can do both. It's pretty straightforward in either sense. If you want to start from the input.
Yeah, imported into is it's an image and TIFF, PNG. We only require you convert it to a .pdf extension, right? Which is pretty straightforward to do. So that's kind of imported into, and then exported out of. It's CSV, and I think that's the format that Jaris and Waymon use most commonly. And then the other format is also like a CAD drawing. So we have integrations with like AutoCAD and then Sagan SmartPlant.
Fantastic. There was a question that was posed by Toriaka Ramsey. For 2 users, is the biggest value in improved quality of PNID mapping or time savings? Then is it possible to set a value for you on use of DataSeer? I would put, great question. First off, I'd pose this to both Jaris and Waymon, but if speaking from perspective as having hands-on experience, is it typically an aspect of both time savings for using the tool, but also I would say included in this question, quality of PND mapping, better accuracy as well? Are you seeing both of those benefits from the typical use case of applying DataSeer to the MTOs? Let's start with Waymon this time for this.
Yeah, the advantage that we see is both. If I had to put one in front of the other, it would be the time savings, because we still come back and do the quality check on what DataSeer has done, but so we confirm and we end up with the same quality of information. It's just so much faster to get that accurate data by using the DataSeer approach.
I would agree with you, Waymon. We're also seeing both, and I find more value in the time savings. I think the test we ran was like 80% time savings, but it was also picking up mistakes that someone made and missed devices that they didn't count that DataSeer picked up. So yeah, both.
Fantastic. Moving on to the next question we have. If we want to use DataSeer to convert a specific PNID of a project we're working on, but the project is confidential, all the engineers have signed NDA for it, how can we do it? So there are data, and this is a challenging question with using any external specific cloud-based solution for project types. Joanne, I'd pass it to you first, if any insight from, at least from a vendor side, but we can also then pass it to the rest of the panel as well.
That's a great question. And, Jaris, you mentioned using ChatGPT, right, to come up with regex expressions. But I think this is kind of an issue that all of the AI tools have. And, look, if you have an on-premise version of it, then maybe it's a little bit more locked down because you're not kind of going to the cloud. But the trade-off with having the on-premise version, as you guys know, is then your learning, your teaching is limited, right, to basically you and your org. I don't know. I would actually pass this over to Jaris and Waymon because confidentiality and data privacy is for you guys almost an ongoing topic.
Yeah, please, Jaris, feel free to take a first stab at it just regarding the confidential information of a given project having to be processed and potentially using a tool externally like DataSeer for its application of takeoff.
Yeah, I think NDAs are important throughout, from the passing of a drawing from the engineer who created it and the client that wants their drawings confidential. Of course, they don't want those drawings to get in the hands of their competitors or someone else. So I'd say the NDA just has to follow all the way through, no matter what software you're using. So that's what I would suggest to do.
And Waymon, do you have any insight from your
Yeah, I
perspective
mean,
in terms of
yeah,
using
so
confidential data?
yeah, so when we face that, there's a couple of different things that we can do. One is we can go ahead and use DataSeer and delete after we're done. So it's not out there, for anyone. Or we just extract those particular PNIDs. Oftentimes it's just one or two that are specific to it, and we do those manually and not through DataSeer.
Yeah, I was going to add, Joe, from a technology point of view, I mean, and this is ongoing research, right? Because this problem hasn't been solved. But there's certainly ongoing research to try to almost like strip out confidential information. So for example, it could be like, the title block, right? In certain schematics that identify the facility, with painstaking details as well as the customers and location. So that is one way of mitigating, right? Sort of confidentiality. Although I've certainly heard of customers and companies where they absolutely just don't want to have it go on the cloud, right? And they prefer to lock it down and have it be on like a .exe on someone's laptop, so to speak.
Fantastic. I'll move into I'll start to answer some of these within chat just as we want to make sure we have a chance to get to all this content in the next 12 minutes. So I'll jump ahead to some other questions that we see within here. Please note, everyone on the call, there is an upvote feature within those specific questions. So if there's anything that does resonate amongst the audience, please give those some highest attention so we can make sure to prioritize those in the remaining time. I'll move ahead to a question that's posed, will PDF and a format of PNID go away and make DataSeer obsolete? It's a very good question, especially around the crux of the value prop that's been discussed thus far. I'll pass it first to Jaris, just in terms of this is kind of related to what we see before in terms of the amount of PDF formats we're coming through, but PDF file of format of PNID, where do we see the state of that potentially changing in the near future or long term?
Yeah, there are smart PNIDs out there. But the engineers that we're working with, we don't get the raw data from the smart PNIDs potentially, or even some of those engineers are not utilizing that software yet. And then you got to also think about all the installed systems out there. We're not only estimating new facilities, we're also doing line additions and retrofits and all of those things too. So I think we're going to always interact with some sort of PDF drawing in some form or fashion for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, Jaris, I would agree with you on that in terms of, I think there's going to stay some PDF formatting out there. There are two things I think is going to happen as we go into the future. I think there'll be more PNID automation coming in. And so I think that's, that's good. But I also think that DataSeer is going to grow and expand in its capabilities. So it's not just limited to PNIDs. I mean, I could see it. I mean, in my mind, I'd love to apply it to my plot plans right now, So there's more out there than just what we're doing right now. And so we're going to continue to push you guys to expand to meet, everything that we're doing. So.
Just to follow up on Waymon on what you're saying, that is what we're thinking of. So, I think this is one of the questions also, that there is a sort of default symbol library for PNIDs that everyone can use. But there's also an ability, still not so highly advertised for the user to build their own symbol library in the tool. So you can potentially build your own, custom, right, symbol library with all the symbols you care about. And you can either take the default library and then continue enhancing it and training it, or just start from scratch. So, the underlying core technology does generalize to more than PNIDs, and that is the direction we're headed to. So.
Yeah, and I think that covers a question that was also posed to us by Kelby. We're asking about the future of DataSeer and CSA. Do we see it staying primarily in PNIDs or other mechanical drawings or the like? I think that Joanne is a nice summation there in terms of the direction of other document types that we look to add to the purview and potentially reskin to the application to fit those specific standards into the future. So I'll be just continuing through, and I'll continue to respond within chat as well for some of these that are more app related that I'm within my purview. But does DataSeer surface information containing the author of a project's edits? It's a good question. Joanne, you could probably speak to that better in terms of what we're doing in terms of collecting edits per project per user and where that's being collected and how, if any, if we're surfacing that today.
So that's a good question. I don't think we are. Joe, you correct me if I'm wrong. We have there's project collaboration activities. So you can be an owner, you can be a collaborator, read only, right? And we do track that activity. But this is actually a great idea. Could we create like a summary report, right, of all the KPIs, sufficient statistics related to activities, right, or even processed, right, entities. We certainly have that. We have those numbers collected and stored in database, but we haven't kind of surfaced it up on the project level or in the user level. But that's a great idea.
So I'm just making sure I'm continuing through here. Related to confidentiality, does DataSeer have the option to have some sort of partnership form to be able to work with confidentiality project data? I think this is more of like a related to the certain permissions of the signing off on specific information in app is what I believe it's being posed as. Joanne, I would put another app-related question, so I'd throw it over to you. But if again, let me go through and just as I curate these, see if there's anything else.
Yeah, let me take a stab at this. So there's the default symbol library that's available to everybody, and then users can also start to customize the training of certain symbols, the default ones, or create new symbols. So those models are trained on the fly, and that's actually right now specific to a user, and that's not kind of shared learnings, right? So in that sense, we have a mechanism for customers to keep their learnings, I guess you could say, private and just for them, right? So there is some flexibility there. Of course, we encourage users to contribute as a whole their meta data and the meta learnings, just because it does allow us to make all the models like the default symbol library better for everybody. But yes, there is a mechanism to kind of hold back your specific meta model learnings, so that way it stays confidential. I mean, one thing I will say though, this, and this is not specific to DataSeer, but even ChatGPT, I think in the past couple of weeks have gotten a lot of press about sort of privacy of data. I think Jaris, you were telling this story in one of our other sessions, right? How Samsung basically banned ChatGPT because it turned out some of their engineers were pasting snippets of code, which they shouldn't, right? Source code into ChatGPT, not realizing that part of the terms and terms of agreement, right, that they signed when you click to get to the tool was, we agree that our data will be used for training.
And there's a question that's been posed. That's really two questions that are related to kind of the visualization of data from DataSeer. One, the question is related to a visual map of the identified data that corresponds to the .csv information. So kind of like taking the UI of the app and having it in some exported format to relate to the CSV data. And then additionally, there's a question posing from Arvind, any future plans for DataSeer to integrate any third-party apps for interfacing with the extracted data? So kind of both tangential there, if you're willing to take in either order in terms of a visualization or a road mapping for integrations.
Yeah, the visualization, I mean, we have a print to PDF option, but I don't think that's what they're asking about. You know, in the CSV download, when you export that data out of the tool, there's an option to just get like a plain takeoff, or you can actually have additional columns where you have the coordinates, like the XY coordinates relative to the PD, like the page dimensions included, right? And so in that sense, you can take that CSV with the location and then put it into your database and then be able to kind of, you know, localize it, right, in a 2D or even 3D kind of, you know, setting. So that capability, the data required for that is there. We don't, I mean, we do have the visual map. I mean, the tool is visual, right? It's kind of like visual with the Excel baked in kind of thing. But I would say, you know, we don't do any sort of more than 2D visualization right now. And then the question about APIs, API integration is something we're actively pursuing and is on our roadmap and that we're working on, because we've realized that there's a lot that you can do once you have the data exported. And it would be great to, for example, integrate DataSeer into, say, like a, you know, takeoff software, right? That is the many that actually is used in estimation.
Fantastic. I'll try to push it on the content that is not just so product-related as I wanted to make great use of while we have a quorum here. Is there anything preventing me from working across organizations, e.g. assets, owner, and engineering company? This is relative to maybe working with the data across these different both customer and vendor and also then service provider. I guess I'll start posing Jaris, if you have any insight to kind of the interplay of data and how it works, or as it going between the owners and your own organization and how that data lives and how you're typically interacting with it?
Of course. So typically when we submit our proposal, we actually convert our Excel-based or CSV-based equipment list, which is motors and devices, and many times we'll actually attach that to our proposal at the end, so the client knows exactly which motors, which devices we've accounted for in our estimate.
And Waymon, any insight from typically how Black & Veatch is working with data from the customer side, and is there any continual interplay as you go between projects? But that continuity of information living or sitting in a vendor space or a cloud space, is that any effect typically in how that data is delivered through continual project delivery potentially?
No, I don't really see that so much. What we do is once we get it into our estimate itself, then the P&IDs are the way it gets communicated, you know, as far as officially to the client. And it would be the P&ID iterations and revisions that would constantly keep that up to date. We use DataSeer as a way to move that information into our estimate. So it would go from the scope document to our estimate, and we would present our estimate. And then, you know, so it would just be living right there in our estimate. Of course, the estimate and the P&IDs are continuously living until the project's built, but yeah, so we would be able to continue using the information, but it would always be updated.
One other thing to add too, so once the project's awarded, that same motor device list will be used for the project execution team to start building out all the systems and plans and for the project itself. And we can also do the P&ID revision comparison.
Fantastic. Well, we have come to time. Now, first I want to extend a thank you to all our panelists for joining. Really appreciate you taking time to help collaborate with us on this content and bring your own expertise and insight on these topics to today's webinar. Any final thoughts from the team before signing off regarding the topic, or any anywhere to find us. We'll share some information in a follow-up in terms of our video and follow-up to all attendees. But any final words from the panel? Joanne, I'll pass it to you to start.
Well, I mean, I think this area of sort of AI estimation will continue to evolve, as Waymon was saying, right? Like, I think this is just the start, and change is happening, and you know, people will, it's kind of impossible not to take advantage of technology, especially when you see, right, all the possibilities out there, and you just, you know, want to try it out. So hopefully AI is not going to be sort of the scary monster that, you know, is coming after our jobs, but really more as an aid. And so that's sort of my hope. Yeah, Jaris?
Yeah, I agree that this is only the beginning, and I think there's a bright future for how AI and technology can help support this industry. I'm always looking for a better way. That's kind of how I ran across DataSeer. So I'm really excited about it.
No, I agree. I think our market and our clients are demanding more faster than we could do, you know, without these tools. And that ultimately is what we're doing. That's why we changed to what we were starting from, because we needed to deliver better, faster and more accurate estimates in this regard. So we're limiting, at least I'm limiting my discussion really around estimating, because that's what I live in. But yeah, our clients are requesting so much faster. The markets are changing, and we've got to help them adapt to those changes. So absolutely.
Thank you. Final note for today's conversation: any unanswered questions will be we'll follow up in a report with any contact information on those questions. Make sure to follow them offline. But thank you everyone for attending today, and appreciate. Until next time, this is the DataSeer team and our friends over at Interstates of Black and Veatch. Thank you for joining, and see you all at the next webinar.
Thank you all. Cheers. Bye.
Thanks.